Yuval Weber joins me now in the studio. He's a fellow at the Daniel Morgan Graduate School and Woodrow Wilson Center. Dr. Weber, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I want to begin by asking about the perception of Russia. We know that the Russians themselves often say they're a misunderstood people in the West. Of course, they're first and foremost a very patriotic people. Do you think Russia's tense relations with the West helped or hurt Vladimir Putin's chance of winning today?
Oh, certainly, it actually quite helped. There are obviously two big issues in the election. One is foreign affairs, sanctions, Ukraine, as your correspondent was detailing, and the second was the economy. The economy has gone out of recession, but it's in sort of a stagnant phase right now and has been for the last few years. Real incomes have fallen 4 years in a row. And so for Vladimir Putin, it was much sort of better and easier to have this election be about foreign affairs and going to his core strength, which is he's always saying, I'm the one who raised Russia from her knees. I'm the only one who can defend us against the Russophobic West. I am the defense of every person in Russia. And that's essentially what they wanted to have the election on.
Sure. Let's talk about those domestic challenges, the demographics of Russia. We know last time I checked, Russia has about 100 million people, or slightly more. That is about 1/3 of that of the population of the US and 1/10 of that of China. As a major power, how can Putin go about reviving the GDP and reviving the demographic challenges?
So the population is about 140 to 145 million, so it's a bit higher than that. But ultimately, the questions or the issues that you've raised are the correct ones. How to get more people to have more babies is ultimately about giving them a future. And because people make decisions, maternity decisions in aggregate, on whether they think the future is going to be brighter than the present. And at this point, they've tried to do a maternity capital program, which is just paying people directly for having more children, but that only went so far. The big issue is how to generate enough economic growth that people believe the future is going to be brighter. And those are questions about basically how is Russia organized. And those are not issues that President Putin, frankly, wants to face, because those involve how much power he personally has, but how much power the elite has. And those are the people who essentially are doing very well from the status quo and don't want to see any big changes. And that's essentially where he's finding himself. The people who actually keep him in power, the security services, the bureaucrats, all those folks, they do well by nothing changing. But the people in general want lots of change. And that's essentially where he finds himself between a rock and a hard place.
Let's talk about foreign policy. How do you expect a fourth term under President Putin will mean for Russia's relations with NATO and with the US?
So at this point, they basically have decided, from Putin's first day in office and even before he came into office, he was talking about making Russia not just into a great power, but some sort of objective scale, but having the West recognize it. And ultimately, that would be something like a security treaty with NATO, the OSCE, the CSTO, which is sort of Russia's security organization, and that's what they want. They want to be recognized and respected as a great power. And they tried to cooperate early on in Putin's time in office. They tried to balance, like in the run-up to the Iraq War. But where they are right now is they've decided that confrontation, including Ukraine, Crimea, including Syria, that this is the only way to be taken seriously by the West. So what we should expect is 6 more years of more or less the same.
To many viewers here in the West, I think they're asking a very simple question. Why would Putin enjoy such high popularity among his own Russian people?
Well, he's essentially equated as the Russian state itself. So this is not like an election in which we have different sort of like politicians with different ideas, ideologies, programs. This is more of like a referendum on Putin directly and sort of like a recoronation of him. And so what people think of when they think of Putin, and I've had friends who have gone on the opinion polling people when they go in like different parts of Moscow and different parts of Russia, people will complain to the polling observers, this is bad, that's bad, criticizing lots of different people, but they'll always say, President Putin, I support him. Because if you don't support President Putin, that puts you so far out of the political mainstream as to leave you basically like an anti-state agitator or dissident. And so for a lot of people, they'll support him because not supporting him is not supporting Russia. And that's essentially a position that you have to be pretty brave in taking.
Lots of nuance over there in Russia. Thanks so much, Dr. Weber.
Thanks for having me.